The following program is a Town of Colonie television production of the William K. Sanford Town Library.
Hello, my name is Diane Conroy-LaCivita, and I'm the Executive Director of the International Center of the Capital Region. It's our honor to be hosting a series of shows here on Channel 17 entitled Thinking Globally. The International Center is located on the campus of Siena College, and the organization's been around about 60 years. Our mission is to really promote citizen diplomacy and global understanding. Today it is my honor. We will be doing a show with several guests, and the entitlement of this show is Promoting Citizen Security by Confronting Trafficking in Persons. This is an issue that goes on around us. We may be unaware, we might have some inkling, but it's something that we need to discuss. And with me today we have, to my immediate left is Gonzalo Martinez, and he is a human traffic specialist with the Worker Justice Center of New York out of Kingston. Ronaldo, and I should back up, I should also say that we are honored to have some international guests from Brazil. They are here for 3 weeks in the United States. They'll be spending 5 days in upstate New York. But they are here as guests of the U.S. State Department, and they're here on this particular subject of human trafficking. So our first guest in that regard is Ronaldo Barres. He is a judge from Brazil. Welcome, Ronaldo.
Thank you.
With us, Zilda, Buzack, an interpreter with the U.S. State Department. Welcome, Zilda.
Thank you very much.
So if you don't mind, we'll start with Gonzalo to talk a little bit about what you do in Kingston, New York in regards to human trafficking.
Sure. So I am based in Kingston with the Human Trafficking Program of the Worker Justice Center, which is a statewide anti-trafficking program. We are grantees of the federal government to provide comprehensive case management services for victims of human trafficking. And for us, specifically, that means, in addition to other services, providing legal services to people who have already been identified as victims within New York State. So we do get to both serve people who have already come out of the situations, but also identify them. So we have a proactive approach of taking our staff directly to the sites that are likely to have cases of either labor or sex trafficking, and then investigating or following up with people who may want to come forward and engage our criminal justice system in helping themselves get out of that situation.
Now, I had heard a statistic recently. They have about 100,000 individuals in New York State who are undocumented.
Yeah, estimates vary. We do have estimates go anywhere between 50,000 and 100,000 migrant seasonal farm workers who might be coming to the United States without the proper documentation to live and work here. That's been the norm in New York State agriculture for decades now, and it very much represents a large part of the clients that we serve at the Worker Justice Center.
Thank you. Ronaldo, could you talk to us about the situation in Brazil, where you see, especially as a judge, where you see the situation? Is it growing? Is it decreasing? Please.
Bom, nós fazemos trabalho no Conselho Nacional de Justiça, que é o órgão administrativo do Poder Judiciário no Brasil.
So we do work with the National Judiciary Council, which is the judiciary part of the council.
De enfrentamento ao tráfico de pessoas.
To combat human trafficking.
De maneira a conscientizar todos os juízes do Brasil da necessidade de combate efetivo e permanente a esse crime que envergonha a humanidade.
To raise awareness among judges in Brazil to combat this crime that is so horrendous and such a shame for humanity.
O Brasil assinou o protocolo de Palermo há 10 anos.
Brazil signed the Palermo Protocol 10 years ago.
E nesses 10 anos tem feito excelente trabalho de enfrentamento ao tráfico, mas os números, apesar disso, de vítimas têm aumentado.
And it's been doing a great job when it comes to combating human traffic, but unfortunately the numbers are still increasing.
O Brasil, que inicialmente era um país exportador de vítimas, passou a ser um país de destino de vítimas, especialmente de pessoas da América do Sul.
Brazil, who used to be a so-called exporter of victims, is now actually a destination for victims, especially from South America.
Então, esse trabalho que nós fazemos no Conselho Nacional de Justiça visa dar uma maior visibilidade a esse crime, a esse problema.
So, in this Justice National Council that I'm part of, we want to give more visibility to this issue.
Em um trabalho integrado e colaborativo, cooperativo com os demais poderes e instituições não governamentais.
And so this is a collaborative work and integrative work with the other departments and also NGOs
E
and other agencies.
E também com outros países, inclusive os Estados Unidos, com quem nós já trabalhamos há 4 anos.
And with other countries, which includes the United States, with whom we've been working for 4 years on this issue.
Nós temos ainda um problema em relação à nossa legislação, que já melhorou em vários aspectos.
We also have an issue with our legislation, which, although it has improved on many aspects,
Agora nós temos uma nova lei para ser aprovada e eu acredito que vai melhorar ainda mais o nosso trabalho.
and there's a bill that is about to be approved, and I think it's going to make our work even easier.
E nós também criamos um site que é para dar uma maior visibilidade e criar um novo espaço de discussão a respeito do problema.
And we also have created a website, which is a good space to create more discussions about this issue.
É um problema realmente sério e o Poder Judiciário tem cumprido o seu papel no Brasil de discutir e combater este crime.
It's a very serious problem, of course, and the judiciary is making efforts to discuss and to combat this crime.
Então, eu quero agradecer a oportunidade e a integração, a cooperação que existe entre os Estados Unidos e o Brasil no enfrentamento a este crime tão grave.
I would like to thank you for the opportunity for being here, and also for the cooperation there is between the United States and Brazil to combat this crime.
Well, we're happy you're with us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gonzalo, in 2007, New York State passed a human trafficking law. And currently, we have a bill in place that has not been passed as part of the Women's Equality Act. And so that has one of its pieces also dealing with human trafficking. I'm wondering, in your opinion, has human trafficking and combating human trafficking improved since the passing of the 2007 law? Is there a lot to be hoped for if this new law gets passed?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, having a framework at the state level to think about this crime as a whole and not just as a sum of its parts has definitely helped every link along the referral chain to identify cases and bring them to the appropriate authorities. That being said, our state legislation is a little ways behind other parts of the country and the federal law. As it is right now, a 16-year-old, a 17-year-old, an 18-year-old that was found in a commercial sex trafficking situation would have to prove force, fraud, or coercion in order for them to be viewed as a victim of human trafficking at the state level, where at the federal level, anyone who is a minor in commercial sex would automatically be treated as a victim of human trafficking. So there are these types of gaps, among others, that some of us who have been working directly with people in New York that have lived under the repercussions of this law are wanting to reform by pushing for this enhanced version of the state law, which is TVPJA, the Trafficking Victim Protection and Justice Act, adding the word justice there to differentiate it from the current legislation that we have.
Now, in Brazil, your laws, you have something similar to what we have here in New York State. How would you compare, or can you compare what we have?
Eu acredito que os Estados Unidos, nos seus diversos estados e também a lei federal, conseguiu avanços maiores do que nós temos até o momento.
I believe that the U.S., when it comes to state laws and also the federal U.S. law, it has made more steps to advance than we have in
Porque
Brazil.
ainda para a lei brasileira é crime somente quando a vítima é explorada na rede, quando há exploração sexual.
Because it's only considered a crime really when the victim is exploited sexually
Pela rede de tráfico de pessoas.
by the human trafficking network.
Com a nova lei que está para ser aprovada,
With this new bill, which
nós
should
vamos
be
ampliar,
approved,
vamos ampliar para todos os tipos de exploração,
it's going to include all types of exploitation.
seja trabalho escravo,
It could be forced labor,
exploração sexual,
sexual exploitation,
tráfico de órgãos,
organ trafficking,
adoção ilegal
illegal adoptions,
ou outras formas de tráfico também serão incluídas nessa lei.
and other forms of trafficking will also be included in this new law.
E haverá uma previsão de maior proteção à vítima,
And so through this law, there's going to be more protection to victims,
porque no caso do Brasil há um temor das vítimas em denunciar, porque elas se sentem desprotegidas.
because victims in Brazil are afraid to report this type of crime because they don't feel protected enough.
Então, com a nova lei, nós acreditamos que haverá uma maior proteção, inclusive às vítimas.
So with this new, if this bill is passed into a law, we believe that there's going to be more protection to victims.
Eu acredito que será uma legislação muito melhor.
I believe that this will really improve our legislature.
Eu, particularmente, acho que deveria ser um pouco maior a pena para o traficante, mas foi uma discussão que aconteceu no Congresso Nacional.
I myself think that the sentence to traffickers should be higher, should increase, and that was a discussion that we've had within the Brazilian National Congress.
E essa lei é fruto de 2 comissões parlamentares de inquérito,
And this law is a consequence of 2 legislative investigation committees,
uma no Senado e outra na Câmara,
one from the representatives and the other one from the Senate.
e as 2 comissões apresentaram um projeto único.
And the 2 committees have come up with a sole project.
Então, nós acreditamos que será um avanço muito grande e, além disso, o Conselho Nacional de Justiça criou agora um fórum nacional para que todos os juízes do Brasil discutam este problema.
And I think that will advance very much the issue in a positive way. And also all the judges from the Justice National Council have been meeting to discuss the
E
same
deem
issue.
prioridade ao julgamento desses casos.
And these cases take priority when it comes to court hearings or trials.
Então, acredito que nós estamos avançando e essa relação integrada com outros países como os Estados Unidos nos ajudará a fazer um combate efetivo a esse crime.
And I think we're taking steps forward, and we also believe that these corporations, such as the one we have to the U.S., will help us combat this crime.
Então, uma vez mais, gostaria de agradecer a oportunidade de estar aqui e entender melhor o sistema legal de vocês no enfrentamento ao tráfico de pessoas.
So one more time, I would like to thank you for the opportunity for being here in this country and to understand also how you deal with this issue of human trafficking.
Thank you, thank you. I'm wondering if it would be okay to ask, average person, when you talk about human trafficking, in essence, it's modern slavery. And if you could give us a synopsis of who that victim is, who is it a particular demographic that you encounter? Is it a particular age category? Is it a particular region? Is it suburban, rural, urban?
Yeah, The author Kevin Bales in his book The Slave Next Door, which actually covers some of what happens up here in upstate New York. Agriculture coined a phrase that I like to use when asked that question, which is that human trafficking is an equal opportunity exploiter. There really are no hard and fast rules to understand who might fall victim to that type of crime, and we've seen the studies confirm that notion, that there really have been people of all levels of education, of all national backgrounds, domestic and international, who do end up falling victim to the many different types of human trafficking that there is. That being said, there are problem industries and there are problem sectors that we see come up again and again, at least within the purview of the work we do at the Worker Justice Center. And those, for us, in the context of labor trafficking, have been precarious, low-wage jobs. Industries where the bar on working conditions is already so low that it doesn't take much to take someone from the regular smuggling, debt bondage, or an indentured servitude situation that has become the norm for many people who make a journey to the United States to work in agriculture, to turn that situation into a full-fledged, certifiable human trafficking, labor trafficking situation that would meet the legal standard. So we do look at that. We do look at risk factors such as nationality, especially when folks are coming to the low-wage industries. Yeah.
No caso do Brasil, eu entendo que o traficante se aproveita de uma situação de vulnerabilidade da vítima.
I believe that in Brazil, the criminal, in this case the trafficker, they take advantage of a situation of vulnerability
Social e econômica.
for victims, be it socially or economically,
E do sonho de uma vida melhor.
and of that dream of having a better life.
Então, no caso de vítimas do tráfico de pessoas para fins de exploração sexual no Brasil, são pessoas muito pobres, normalmente mulheres com menos de 30 anos.
So in the case of victims of human trafficking with the intent of sexual exploitation, usually they're vulnerable women who are younger than 30 years of age.
E que normalmente têm um filho e deseja dar uma vida melhor ao filho.
Usually have one child and they want to have a better life for their child.
Normalmente são solteiras, mães solteiras.
They're usually single mothers.
E tem um sonho de uma vida melhor para o filho e para si e para os pais também.
And they dream of a better life for their child, their children, for themselves and also for their parents.
Isso acontece também no caso de trabalho escravo.
And when it comes to slavery,
Eu acredito que o traficante se aproveita dessa situação então de vulnerabilidade.
I believe it's the same situation, whereas the trafficker takes advantage of a position of vulnerability of the victim,
E dessa vontade de melhoria de vida.
and also of that will to have a better life.
E aí fica mais fácil para ser enganada, né, pelo traficante. A vítima quer melhorar e aí sim cai na rede do tráfico.
So criminals can be really deceptive because these people want to have a better life, so it's easier for them to fall into the trafficking trap.
Isso está acontecendo agora, especialmente com os bolivianos que vêm para o Brasil.
This is happening actually currently with Bolivian nationals that come to Brazil,
Para trabalhar especialmente na indústria da confecção
especially to work in the garment industry,
e são escravizados.
and they're enslaved once they start.
Então eu acho que basicamente é a exploração o sonho de uma vida melhor.
So basically, it's exploiting the dream of having a better life.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. We're going to
Thank you.
take a short break here so we can swap out some of our guests. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Hi, we're back, and I'd like to introduce a new guest with us at the table here, Ebenezer Oliveira. He is a special advisor in the city of São Paulo, and what I learned today is it's the largest city in the Southern Hemisphere. Ebenezer, welcome.
Bem-vindo, Ebenezer.
Obrigado.
And if
Thank
you don't,
you.
Oh, thank you. And if you don't mind,
Por favor,
would you share a little bit about what you
falar
do?
pouquinho a respeito do seu trabalho.
Boa tarde. Para nós é um prazer poder compartilhar um pouco da nossa experiência.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure for us to be able to share a little bit of our experience.
Eu trabalho na Prefeitura de São Paulo, em uma Secretaria de Direitos Humanos e Cidadania.
I work for the City of São Paulo at the Ministry for Human Rights and Citizenship.
Lá nós desenvolvemos uma agenda chamada Agenda do Trabalho Decente.
We have developed an agenda where I work, which is called the Agenda for Fair Labor Practices,
que tem como objetivo o enfrentamento ao tráfico de pessoas, o trabalho escravo e a erradicação do trabalho infantil.
The goal is to eradicate human traffic, child labor, e qual é o terceiro?
Tráfico de pessoas, trabalho escravo e erradicação do trabalho infantil.
And also slave work.
E lá na prefeitura a gente coordena uma comissão municipal para a erradicação do trabalho escravo.
So we coordinate a city committee to eradicate forced labor.
E agora nesse final de ano, nós estamos lançando o primeiro plano municipal de erradicação do trabalho escravo da cidade de São Paulo.
And actually, towards the end of the year, we launched this first plan for city plan to eradicate forced labor.
E desenvolvemos diversas atividades, campanhas educativas com o objetivo de enfrentar o tráfico de pessoas e o trabalho escravo com diversas organizações que compõem essa comissão municipal.
So, we have a lot of activities and campaigns and educational campaigns as well to fight against child labor and human trafficking. And we have a lot of organizations involved in it.
Isso.
Now, one thing we had talked about in an earlier discussion was some of the initiatives you have at airports
Falamos dessas
in
iniciativas
Brazil. Would you mind sharing that with the audience?
Essas iniciativas no aeroporto no Brasil, você poderia falar um pouquinho mais aqui para a plateia?
No Brasil, nós temos dois principais equipamentos do Poder Executivo.
In Brazil, we have two main instruments of the executive branch
Para enfrentar o tráfico de pessoas.
to fight against human trafficking.
Um deles é o posto avançado de atendimento humanizado ao migrante,
One of them is the advanced stations at airports to give assistance to individuals who are migrating.
que tem como objetivo atender todas as pessoas, sejam elas vítimas ou não, de maneira humanizada,
To provide assistance to victims or non-victims in a humanized way.
e nas áreas de fronteira dos estados.
At the border areas, state border areas.
Então, por exemplo, nos aeroportos nós temos esses postos avançados, mas também em portos, em áreas onde você tem uma fronteira molhada, como a gente diz, né? Rios, ou principalmente rios ou mesmo o mar.
And we have these remote posts everywhere where there are borders, such as airports and also harbors or ports. Wherever we have situations of harbors and also that comes in contact with the water, be it the river or the ocean.
E é importante porque faz todo tipo de atendimento às pessoas que procuram esse serviço. Não só vítimas, como eu disse, mas migrantes em geral, pessoas deportadas ou não admitidas em outros países. A equipe...
Momento. So we provide all kinds of assistance to, as I said, victims and non-victims, and also migrating individuals and persons who have been deported or not deported.
E aí a equipe está preparada para receber de maneira humanizada e fazer uma assistência e colocar esse indivíduo dentro de uma rede de proteção, seja ela vítima ou não.
So it's a team that is providing assistance to these persons, whether they're victims or not. So it's part of a network to provide assistance to them.
E o outro equipamento são os núcleos estaduais de enfrentamento ao tráfico de pessoas.
Another instrument is also the state centers to combat human trafficking,
que funciona dentro dos departamentos públicos,
which works inside public agencies.
que tem o objetivo de articular essa rede de proteção à vítima, entre outras funções.
In order to improve the protection to victims, as well as other functions.
Junto com as organizações estaduais que são necessárias dependendo do caso que aquela pessoa precise, caso a caso.
So with also state agencies to help each victim or each person who needs help or assistance on a case-by-case level.
São os dois principais equipamentos no âmbito do executivo.
So that's the executive branch's most important or two main instruments to help victims or non-victims.
So it's very proactive in regards to enforcement.
É bem preventivo para
E assistencial.
cumprimento.
É preventivo e assistencial.
Proactive and also its assistance.
Yeah. Gonzalo, could you share your perspective in New York State in regards to enforcement strategies?
Yeah, absolutely. In New York, we were lucky to actually have one of the few federally funded human trafficking task forces out in Western New York and possibly down in the city. There may be a couple of other funding streams, but actually, most of the state of New York has come together on its own without necessarily a federal mandate. There are federal guides on how law enforcement, NGOs, and the faith-based community can come together to combat trafficking in their communities. And I think many regions of the state have done that on their own initiative. And as of the end of this year, I can say that I know at least every region in the state has plans to form a task force like that, and most regions already have. In addition to these regional task forces, which include one right here in the Capital District, there is a statewide government agency task force that is led by the state government, and they also coordinate efforts. And probably very similar to what is going on in Brazil, the task forces include all the different law enforcement stakeholders that need to be at the table in order to respond effectively to the crime. We sometimes forget here in New York, but we are a border state. And that brings some of the same challenges that were just being described as a port of entry, as a region of transit for people who may be brought through Canada on their way to other urban centers around the country. And law enforcement is very much aware of that at this stage in 2014. They weren't always. A lot of us are playing catch up in terms of training internally within our organizations to really stay abreast of everything that's happening with this fastest growing criminal enterprise in the world. But I can say, being a member of all these regional task forces and coordinating the one in the North Country, that we are in great shape in terms of everyone who may be needed in a trafficking situation being present. Where we still have more challenges is in the identification of cases and bringing more cases into that referral process. But law enforcement is very much coordinated and ready to respond when these cases do come to New York.
So that brings me to my next question, and how do we as constituents support or approach a victim? How do we recognize that? What are some of those signs that maybe we should be looking for or not?
Yeah, I mean, on the first question of the approach, my advice would be with humility, with the understanding that ultimately there are many agencies and there are many experts on this topic now, but ultimately the real experts on human trafficking are the people who have lived through situations like that or who are currently struggling to move away from someone who is victimizing them. Once we begin to understand that dynamic, we will act less as saviors to these people and more as what we really are, which are support agencies that are there to provide tools, some legal, some related to services, and in all cases, just support for a person to make their own determination that they are ready to move on and that they are ready to take the risks that might have to be taken to walk away from someone who has trafficked them. And in terms of actual, warning signs or things that might let the average person know that they might be encountering a trafficking situation, it comes down to a question of free will. If we encounter anyone who it does not have the ability to choose where they work, where they live, if they have a debt to someone, how they pay off that debt, the terms of that repayment. If we are meeting people in our communities, in the workplaces that we are part of, and receiving services and goods from people who we might say don't have the ability to choose their conditions, then we might have a much longer list of questions to ask about the power and control dynamics that might be keeping someone in that situation. And the Department of Homeland Security has actually issued a very helpful quarter card that people can keep in their wallets that would have, it has a very short list of questions, a checklist that folks might be able to ask themselves and ask of people they might be meeting to determine if someone might be a victim of trafficking.
I'd like to pose that question to you as well. So in Brazil, how does one approach or support the victim from a constituency point of view?
Aborda uma pessoa ou uma vítima do ponto de vista do constituinte.
O trabalho com a vítima, especificamente, é um trabalho que é mais delicado e mais difícil de se fazer.
Work with victims specifically, it's a little more delicate and it's a little more challenging.
Porque nós temos indícios tanto do tráfico de pessoas, tanto para a exploração sexual quanto para o trabalho escravo.
We do have signs of trafficking, human trafficking, for forced labor as well as for sexual exploitation.
Mas, na minha opinião, há uma certa cultura que esconde um pouco a denúncia e não permite com que os casos apareçam.
But in my opinion, there's a culture to hide these reporting of these crimes or to not want it to come forward.
Principalmente para alguns casos específicos, a exploração do trabalho da criança em casa, servidão doméstica, é um tipo de trabalho que pouco a gente consegue atingir.
And for specific work, such as forced child labor for domestic work, is something that we cannot detect very well.
E mesmo o trabalho escravo, que a gente sabe que acontece, mas há uma certa permissão desse tipo de exploração, principalmente de imigrantes.
In forced labor, we know that it happens, but we know there's some sort of permission for this type of work, especially when it comes to immigrants.
E no caso da exploração sexual, há uma certa discriminação em relação ao trabalho como a gente fala no Brasil, profissionais do sexo.
And also for sexual exploitation, there is some prejudice surrounding what we call in Brazil sexual professionals.
E que impede com que casos de tráfico, claramente de tráfico, sejam investigados ou sejam identificados por essa discriminação em relação às pessoas ou mais vulneráveis ou mais pobres ou que tenham esse tipo de atividade menos aceita pela sociedade.
It's more difficult to detect due to a prejudice against these people who are in a vulnerable situation, or they're poor, or they're in these roles that are less accepted by society.
Yeah.
Thank you. In our last couple of minutes, I'd like, just if you could very briefly, what can we do to help you do what you do in regards to confronting human trafficking and modern slavery?
Well, a calculation that maybe every individual can make is how complicit are we as a consumer base that often doesn't inform themselves on the supply chains that bring the products to our tables and the services that we are patronizing. We can begin at a very personal level to take account of how many questions we've asked at the checkout counter about working conditions of the people who produce our goods and services. In addition to that, of course, we can support legislation that would definitely, at least at the state level, strengthen some of the penalties. Specifically for what we do at the Worker Justice Center, it would strengthen penalties against labor traffickers, which right now are actually considered lesser offenses than people who traffic others for sex. And we're looking to bridge that gap. And if folks are politically inclined, following the fate of bills like the TVPJA as it was bundled into the women's equality agenda and may yet be or might not be in the future, those are definite, straightforward ways to support the work that we do. And of course, to be aware in your communities of who is addressing the issue. If there is an NGO like the Worker Justice Center, like the International Institute of Buffalo, like USCRI right here in Albany that is very involved in the work, then asking how you can help, asking how you can volunteer and educate yourself and your communities more is always a good step.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Ebenezer, what can we do here in upstate New York to support what you do in Brazil?
No estado de Nova York para dar apoio que você faz no Brasil.
Eu acho que já o estado de Nova York já está nos ajudando quando nós estamos aqui fazendo parte desse programa, podendo trocar essas informações e aprender com o estado de Nova York e com os Estados Unidos.
So the New York State is already helping us by having us here, and how we can share and get knowledge from you, not only in the state of New York, but here in the United States.
E no Brasil nós temos uma rede nacional de enfrentamento ao tráfico de pessoas.
In Brazil, we have a national network for combating human trafficking.
Que eu faço parte. E mais duas colegas que também fazem parte desse programa, a Lívia e a Leila, que também estão aqui nesse programa nos Estados Unidos, fazem parte.
Which I am part of this network. I'm part of, and also two colleagues, female colleagues, who are here, also seated next to us, and their name one is Lívia, the other one is Leila, and they're right here with us.
E que a gente está podendo trazer um pouco dessa experiência dessa rede nacional para os Estados Unidos, a maneira como a gente enfrenta o tráfico de pessoas lá.
So we're able to share our national network work and what we do in order to prevent and to combat human traffic down in Brazil.
E lá a gente se reúne, os estados se reúnem periodicamente para discutir a questão do tráfico. Todos mais da metade dos estados do Brasil se reúnem para discutir o tráfico de pessoas.
So states get together on a monthly basis. More than 50% of the Brazilian states get together once a month to discuss this human trafficking issue.
E aí eu acho que essa experiência que a gente está adquirindo aqui nos Estados Unidos, a gente vai poder levar para essa rede nacional também e compartilhar essas informações.
And so what we are learning here in the United States, we're going to be able to share the information that we're learning here to our national network.
Muito obrigado pela oportunidade.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you. And Gonzalo, Ebenezer, Ronaldo and Thelma, thank you. Thank you so much for coming here today, talking about this very important subject. Please, if you are interested in learning more, stay tuned. We'll be discussing this on further episodes, as well as you can reach out to the Worker Justice Center and find out what the U.S. State Department is doing in regards to bringing groups or delegations here from all over to this world to talk about this very important subject. So on behalf of the Town of Colonie, the Colonie Town Library, Channel 17, and the International Center, thank you. Thank you for watching.